I got Ed Castellanos joining me. It's a unique situation. We're here in Indianapolis. We've got the NFL Combine. So Ed got a hold of me a couple weeks ago, gave me the heads up, and I'm glad we were able to hop on this podcast and, talk some business, talk some athletes, talk finances, kind of a wide gamut of different topics. But Ed, I appreciate you joining me.
Hey, Jason, I really appreciate the time, man.
So give the audience a little context of who you are, what you do, and your role, within Raymond James, and specifically for the Seiler Group, just to get us up to speed.
Well, I have a pretty unique job. I think that I'm blessed with the opportunity that I have here. We deal with pro athletes. It's a financial group that concentrates on the financial growth of these pro athletes. And I just happen to be the senior in marketing, the director at Raymond James, that provides the opportunity on how do we really go about approaching these young athletes and what's the right game plan with the help of Raymond James supporting us, and how do we create this plan of how to make an athlete really achieve the goals that they want to achieve at the end of the day. Okay. And as everyone sees from the public eye, what they spend, what they do with their money, everyone is very attracted to that. But in reality, when you're on the inside of it, okay, you get to see the emotional side of it. You get to see the family side of it, and you really get to see, as we all know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So our job is to really concentrate on the good side, on how to achieve those goals over a long period of time.
Sure. And now, is this something you've done your entire life, or how long you've been with the Seiler Group?
I've been with the Seiler Group for about 10 years now. The way I got here was Thomas Seiler, our wealth and management director. We knew each other back in college. If I tell you the day and the year, I would tell you my age, okay? But it's been quite a long time. It's been a personal relationship for close to 40 years. He's always managed my money all my life. I've done okay, kind of retired, kind of in an early part, went into real estate. And from real estate, we always had, sort of a goal to work it together one day. And the opportunity came, and it was the right time for me. And I'm glad I waited a little bit longer, because in this game, a lot of wisdom has a lot of value, and from living the experience that I lived over the last 30 years in business and in life in general, I could bring a pretty good perspective to these young players and also their families. Sure.
Now, we got introduced by within Raymond James. That's the beauty of the firm where we work, is that there's a wide gamut of financial advisors and clientele that we work with. We both had experience with athletes, but from one sport to the other, it can vary. Now, tell me a little bit about the athletes that the Seiler Group works with.
Well, the Seiler Group, when we first started, you have to realize that at the same time, it's a business, okay? And you have to look at the sports and how do they generate that income stream. So when you look at it, you see football, instantly you go from college right into the NFL. There really is no minor league system, okay? You got the CFL, you got the USFL that actually came back again. But in reality, you go from college straight into the NFL. And if you don't really get drafted, you have the undrafted free agency portion of it, and you have the practice squad portion of it. That's the minor league system, sure, let's say, but you're still getting paid quite well, okay? In basketball, as we all know, you get paid the same way right out of college, and the contracts are more guaranteed. Where in the NFL, if you're not picked within a certain round of those 7 rounds, the money's not fully guaranteed. Okay. And there's signing bonuses involved. Okay. So there is income stream coming in. Where in Major League Baseball, you have a different situation, right? As you know, in Major League Baseball, you have a situation where a certain amount of rounds, okay, signing bonus, and then there's the journey of getting to the major leagues. That average could be 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 3 years, okay? And the pay system is kind of not as aggressive as you see in the NFL and in the NBA, where if you're not at that level yet, you're in a practice squad, there's a certain amount of money that you can make per week. And in the NBA, you have a 2-way contract, and you also got the G League, which is a significant amount of money. So when you look at the picture, when we first started, we concentrated on the NFL and the NBA, okay, to create that revenue stream that we were going for, okay? So we stayed in those two markets because of that reason. And there's also marketing opportunities, also endorsement deals, okay? Not as aggressive as in the Major League Baseball. So there are different types of revenue streams, okay? And when you're in the financial business, you're looking for revenue streams, okay? So that's why we were in that space immediately, okay? Now that we have accomplished our goals and reached a certain level of success, we're able now to concentrate on other areas that we believe to become number one in the space that we want to be in, okay? Now we could concentrate on baseball, hockey, outside of the, football and basketball stream, to put us in the position of not from a financial point of view any longer, but from a branding point of view. Yep. So the Seiler Group is really looking to become, the number one financial institution in the sports world.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you touched on a point that I think, Major League Baseball is trying to get to, which is the fact of, in Major League Baseball, you get drafted, there's a waiting period potentially. You're starting to see some teams that are starting to accelerate that process. And now with the CBA on deck next year, there's a lot on the table. There's a lot of talks of salary cap, salary floor. There's talks of trimming the draft from 20 to 10 rounds, and everything that's been tossed around sounds more and more like where they're trying to head is closer to an aligning to where the NFL is. Now, I do believe there'll always be a minor league system, but I think it's going to be a very much condensed version. And it's like, well, why are they doing this? Well, Major League Baseball, right? The combine's a big deal to the NFL, right? Major League Baseball now has a combine, but they're trying to get it to where more fans are paying attention to the combine and to the draft. As it stands now, unless you're a baseball nut, not many people know what team is drafting who and where they are in the system and the progression of everything. But you get that instant, that money stream, that revenue stream, like you're talking with NFL and NBA, and it's just a little bit different. But I think that's where it's eventually going to trend. But I think where you're going to start seeing the trend on the baseball side is where in the basketball and football side is NIL. And I want to talk about that a little bit just from the standpoint of, obviously in football and basketball, it's a little bit different in terms of the revenue stream in college sports. That's where the money is. Let's just call it what it is, with the exception of a handful of Southern schools. And even at that, they're not making the school a ton of money, right? So talking to me a little bit about how the Seiler Group works with athletes on the NIL space and how that's evolved even just in the time that NIL became a thing.
Well, NIL has definitely changed the landscaping for everybody, right? If you were involved in sports, NIL has brought a new opportunity. And in any new space, okay, there's going to be a learning curve. And I think we're going through that right now. And I think we still have a few more years of that learning curve. And you could see that depending on who you're watching, there's a lot of frustration going on, right? There's a lot of unfair play going on. But at the end of the day, okay, what was the purpose of it? The purpose was to play the players to pay the players. That was the real purpose of it, okay, at the end of the day, right? And I don't think anyone expected it to go from $5 to $5 million so quickly, okay? And how much, politics got into play from from a government side, states getting involved, they're creating their own laws for NIL, and even now, certain states allow high school kids to get paid, okay? So as we all know now, there's a revenue sharing base involved, okay? There's a certain amount of money, I believe it's $20.6 million that certain colleges get that they need to divide within their university, okay? And there's other revenue streams on top of that as well. So NIL for us has created an opportunity to rush our process in developing the athlete to a financial relationship, okay? Where in the past, you would wait, let's say, to their junior or senior year to build that relationship, okay? Because you always hear, I got no money to manage, right? It's not about the money. It's really about the relationship. It's the understanding of it. But they had no money, okay? NIL presents a new obstacle, right? You make $100,000, you make $50,000, you make $500,000, you make $4 or $5 million. There's a tax obligation now to that, right? So now you're looking around and saying, who do I speak with about this tax obligation, right? Now you have a revenue stream. Am I getting paid on a W-2 or am I getting paid on a 1099? Should I open up an LLC? Is it worth it? What type of LLC? What are the retirement plans that are tax incentive, right? Is it a Roth 401k? Is it a traditional 401k? Is it a SEP? So you really have all these questions that people never got exposed to before, right? And even, as you go through it, okay, it's not always an advantage to open up an LLC, right? In some cases, but everyone wants one because it's the buzzword, right? And if you don't have one, you feel like you're left out, right? So you really need to really educate and really speak with the families on an individual basis based on what their needs are and where they need to be at from a tax purpose. Because the tax really controls what you're going to do, right? So, do I open up a corporation that's an S corp? Do I open up a corporation that's a sole proprietorship? Do I open up a partnership? Where is my actual federal tax rate? Is it at 10%? Is it at 12%? Is it at 22%? Is it at 32%? Like 35%? Am I single? Am I married? So there's so many questions. So being able to have a professional like ourselves to be able to navigate those questions for you and give you a direction is very important now. And the NIL also allows you to build an earlier relationship with the athlete. There's no guarantee, but if you do the right thing, okay, you get to build that relationship, hopefully for a lifetime. And that's our goal that we really take in our group. Okay. Yeah. We don't want to manage an individual's assets for 1 or 2 years. We want a lifetime because it takes a lifetime to really create what we want to create at the end of the day. Okay. Generational wealth money, right? It's not overnight. Okay. Sure. So that's important to us, is building that relationship. But yes, NIL has definitely created a faster stream to the marketplace, which is for us is athletes.
Now, staying there on NIL, given the fact that these conversations are happening earlier, we're talking about, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, right? Stepping into some money. What are those conversations like, between the families and from an athlete perspective?
Well, like I said before, every family's different. Okay. Some are looking for maybe education. Some might be looking for lifestyle. Okay. Some players might be looking to, what 17, 18-year-old kid that doesn't want a car, right? At that early age, right? Those are probably the first purchases of an athlete, okay, is a car, right? So now, with that car comes, to them, it's just going to a car dealership, just buying a car. But in reality, there's a lot more to that, right? There's a credit score. There's a credit bureau, right? There's understanding how to maneuver within the credit bureau system to build up a credit score, okay? Even though you might have a good credit score, if you're not a high school kid, you're a college kid, you have a credit card and you build up your credit score to 750, when you walk into a car dealership, it's your first major purchase. So no bank is going to give you a 4% loan, most likely. Okay, unless it's co-signed, even though you're making $500,000. Okay, so you really have to understand the system. Okay, and a lot of kids really don't understand simple interest rates. Okay, they're walking to a car, they want it, right? They really don't even have a credit score yet, and the car dealer is telling them, 19%, 14%, 12%. To a young athlete, that doesn't seem like anything because they really don't understand interest rates. But over 5 years, on a $75,000 loan, at 12%, you're paying between $25,000 to $29,000 just in interest on the life of that loan. And then they tell you, after 1 year, that you can refinance it. That's not really true in most cases, right? And if you miss a payment, no bank is going to refinance that loan on you. So the education of that, right, and being able to build that relationship of honesty that between each other and being honest with the families is really a big deal with us. Sure. That real transparency of, I'm going to tell you what it really is, not what you really want to hear.
Right. Now, hang in there for a bit, right? Because the reality is now some of these guys are making an income that, regardless if they end up playing on the NFL or not, let's just say they hypothetically do, that they could be potentially making more money in college than they are in the early stages of their professional career. What are the conversations like in terms of, I was doing silly things with hundreds of dollars in my bank account, right? And then putting yourselves in the shoes of an 18-year-old who is getting $1 million and is getting biweekly or monthly checks in the amount that they've never seen before. What's the education like in terms of the behavioral side of finances when it comes to athletes and the families, specifically just on the NIL?
I'm going to answer the first part of that question first, okay, where you ask, coming back to college or staying in the NIL space. Recently, we see a lot of frustration on the basketball side of that, right? Recently, we just saw a G League player actually come back into college, right? I don't know if that's a healthy other situation, okay? I think that we got away from a college athlete and the concentration was really on education. Okay, I think we gotten away from that, all right? Even though we knew that the player was there to play sports, but at least the illusion was that there was some type of education involved in that space. Not that athletes aren't getting educated, but some of these athletes are there to play a sport, okay? So in that aspect, you had recently a player that just, going to go in the 4th, 5th round, right? From an NFL perspective, that's a $4 million contract over 4 years, let's just say, if he gets picked in a later round, and it's not guaranteed money, right? So a college throws $4 million at him. So why would you not stay back in college, right? So you got that question that needs to be addressed, okay? And then you got the question of, how do these families really adjust to this large income stream that they're getting so quickly, right? And what really is a big surprise to a lot of them when it comes down to, again, is taxes. If you're a single man making $500,000, you're in a very high tax bracket, right? So the first step is really to say, you're at a 35% tax bracket, let's just say, okay? And the real simple math is, I give you $100, the government's taking 35, so 65 is really left in your pocket. But that's only the touch of it, because now you have state taxes, okay? On top of state taxes, right, depending on what state you're in, right, you have the city taxes. And then when you go from city taxes, you got FICA taxes, right? So before you look at it, it's not 35%, right? If I'm out in California, it's almost 11%. And I'm going to get taxed pretty heavily on that. Now, there's a margin to that, okay? There's a stepping block to that, right? But at the end of the day, it's a good number, okay? So now you got yourself FICA, you add up everything, and really, let's just say for easy math, it's $1 million. I'm out in California. It's not $1 million. It's $480,000. And I haven't even bought anything yet, okay? So now, when they see that and when you show them that, right, it's an eye-wakener, right? Because they're thinking $1 million. And the real issue is, is the perspective of what social media puts out there too, right? Now their family members, their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, their friends, dude, you just got $1 million. I don't got $1 million. You really don't understand, right? I got half of that, okay? And I haven't even bought a glass of water yet, okay? So you really have to control the situation that they understand. Education. We're very big on education. Without it, you're not going to have success. And what is the education? The budgeting. Simple budgeting, right? A simple template so they can understand what their money is going and what is the percentage of where their money is going, right? So we have five other categories, let's just say. Housing, auto, personal, luxury, other miscellaneous, okay? So, you live out in California. Now, obviously, NIL, college is paid for. They get stipends. That game is not played. But we set them up to understand in the years to come, this is what's going to happen. This is the reality of it, okay, right? So you could take a player and you could say, you got $3,000 in rent. You go buy your car. It's a $2,000 payment, let's just say, right? You got your personal, right? You got your cell phone. You got. They go out and they order. They eat all day. They don't cook anything, right? Right. So they're spending a lot of money just on restaurants, just eating every day, right? Hanging out with their friends, gas, insurance, all these things, right? And when you look at it and you look at the percentages and you look at the expense ratio, we want to stay that within a certain range, right? And when they look at their car and 22% of their money is being spent on a car, it really wakes them up, right? It really says, wow, maybe I don't need to buy that certain amount of dollar car. I can get the same value at 30% less. And what does that mean, right? So when I get a family like that, or we get those experience, I know that we have a fighting chance now, right? To achieve the goal that we really want to achieve, right? Because if he has 3 more years left in college, he could build a significant amount of retirement fund within those 3 years based on NIL money, okay? So he could walk away with a certain income stream or retirement that, they have age on their side. That's very important, right? That's the beauty of youth, right? Right? You got 20, 30 years and you're only going to be 45 years old, and $100,000, decision, or $200,000 that decision could be millions of dollars for you at 45 years old. That's an opportunity that just doesn't come too often. So educating that is so important to them. Okay. That's one of the basic principles of starting to, show them, right, that with patience over time, you could build very significant wealth, not just for yourself, but for generations to come.
And I would even say that's true for society, all these things, but even more so for an athlete, right? Like they're obviously a student, but now there's some gray area with, are they professional athletes that are just attending college? But, understanding gross versus net, right? Like that example that you illustrated, 48% or 480 out of a million, right? Like the returns and showing 7% compounded is all great, but it's about what you keep. And there's a huge knowledge gap, right? Especially for kids that are 18 years old. And one thing you had to mention, I want to bring up as we pivot this conversation more to the professional side, is you had used the analogy of an escalator, right? So these
Who used the analogy of an escalator?
You did.
Oh, I did with you.
Yeah.
Like so, coming over here.
Yeah. So but it was a good analogy in terms of, in college you really don't need to worry about much, right? In terms of, whether you have your housing taken care of, this, that, the other, but you're showing up to practice, you're doing this, you're doing that. Outside of the college world, it's a little bit different. So, you go from maybe this escalator ride to, okay, I got to put on my big boy pants here. This is my career and I'm driving this. So how do those conversations evolve as they get closer to, they're here at the combine, and then the next thing you know, it's draft day, and next thing you know, they're on the roster? How do those conversations evolve?
There's goals. Goals are important. You have to establish goals in anything in life. Okay. It really shows the discipline. Okay. And with those goals, okay, you're able to show them what the future could really be. Okay. Not make believe, but you stay within this goal structure. Okay. And you understand what 2, 3 years, 4 years look like. Okay. Based on your contract. Okay. And then what if scenarios after your first contract. Okay. Like in the NFL, it's a 4-year deal. Okay. There's options to go to 5 years, 6 years, your first round pick. There's little things that you can play with. Okay. But at the end of the day, the majority of the players have a 4-year contract. Okay. If you're undrafted free agent, it's a 3-year contract. Okay. Which actually is an advantage. You lose the signing bonus, but you have one less year of obligation with the team. Okay. So when you look at these things, you got to look at them from a perspective of 1 year at a time. Okay. But I'm going to fast forward you what those 4 years could look like. And I'm going to show you based on certain scenarios of your behavior. If you stay within this range, you stay within this range, you stay there within this range, you're going to see how much money you're going to have at the end of 4 years. What you're going to save, that what's in your portfolio, that what's in your 401k, okay, from the league, okay? And what can that really buy you? What can your portfolio really buy you as a revenue stream, right? And you're only 25 years old, right? Most people can't live on $50,000. We know that already, okay? Right? And these athletes are not living on $50,000 either, okay? So whatever budget that they have established for them, okay, they're going to start to understand over the years from the education that we give them, because we're really big on that, okay? It's the number one thing that we preach on, okay? They're going to realize that at the end of their 4-year contract in the NFL, most athletes, If they're living beyond $50,000, let's say $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, they know that their portfolio cannot generate them that type of lifestyle yet, right? One day they're going to run out of money, right? If they don't find a job, okay? So now you have to start preparing them for that job, maybe, right? You start having those light conversations early. You don't have them later, because later is panic, right? Because they think it's never going to end. It's going to end one day. How do you make that transition? Well, you build that transition, those conversations early. You don't build them late. You don't try to be their best friend, right? You don't try to be their buddy, right? Right? You earn that respect from them. You earn the value of family, right? You earn the prestige of being a real friend, right? Because I don't want nothing back from them, right? I just want to be able to have the Seiler Group manage their money to create the goals that they want to live. And that's the enjoyment at the end of the day, right? That's the real growth of this. It's the only reason why I'm in it. So they could change their own culture space, their own landscaping within themselves and within their own family structure, right? Because they're going to be looked at as a very important person in the family now. It's just the way that society sees things, okay? So if he's educated, if he or she is educated or disciplined in that matter, people are going to look at him differently. They just are, right? Rather than someone who's just giving everything away. You're not going to survive because you can't predict injuries. I don't have that future, okay? So we really look at the time frame of a contract. What is it? How do we really break it down and educate them how it's broken down, right? Because there are certain things in the contract that could be an advantage to a player. Player makes a Pro Bowl, his salary is going to go up, right? They got, performance money, right? Which means that depending on how many plays that a team does over a course of a year on offense and how many times you're on the field, you get a percentage of a performance check, right? The later you're picked in the round, the greater the percentage because you're really not supposed to be playing yet. Right? So for a late round pick, that could be, $50,000, could be $150,000, could be $300,000. I've seen it even higher. Okay. So there's a lot of things that you could really bring out and show them, how to create those opportunities and really show them the end goal of this. Right? Like for an example, another great example is endorsement money. Marketing money. It's an illusion. It's not for everybody. I'm talking about the NFL, okay? So not everyone's going to make endorsement money. So when a parent comes in and says, I want to have him just live off of his endorsement money. Well, is he a quarterback? Because if he's a defensive lineman, that's probably not going to happen.
I think they've seen too many videos of Gronkowski talking about how he can live off his endorsement money. If
he's on a fantasy football, meaning a running back, a wide receiver, a quarterback, a tight end, okay, he might get endorsement money because of playing cards, okay, right? So, how you maneuver that space, that outside income that's coming in, also is a factor. But there's not a lot of players that are going to make a significant amount of money from marketing. Okay? It's just, that's really social media playing social media, which is dangerous. Okay? So, we make them aware of that very early. And the goal is at the end of the day, right, is to, at the end of every year, they can measure their own success. A+, A-, B+, C, D, F, right? They have control of that, right? And when we see anything going in a direction that's not healthy, we have bells and whistles to make us aware of that immediately.
How does the planning conversation change as they're knocking on the door of stepping into significant wealth, whether that be via draft or via getting that second contract?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because you go from making a decent income in college.
That's a good question.
You're on a rookie contract in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like those are two bigger steps potentially, right? You go from 100 grand, 150 to, right? Or you go from making league minimum to, hey, you made it, right? Lord willing, you didn't tear your knee before you got there, right? We don't know the crystal ball of anybody's health, but how do those conversations differentiate from NIL?
Yeah,
those conversations.
That's a good question. I could answer that question in 2 or 3 ways. Because if I'm talking to a Major League Baseball player who's been in the minor leagues and gets called up, right? He gets a per diem now, where he was making, $150 a day. Now he's being called up to Major League Baseball and he's making $3,500 a day. Okay, so that's a different conversation. Okay, because he's had a signing bonus with us for a few years. Now he's finally getting, all of a sudden, he not only quadrupled his salary, he multiplied it many times over. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is different. I made 60 grand last year. I stayed up in the major leagues for 30 days and I made, $250,000. Right. So in that aspect of it, it's an accomplishment. It's a goal. Okay. And now how do we really keep that goal going? Right. And I'm a big believer in reinvesting in yourself. So off-season training, right? Because now you see what's out there and you can get it. Okay. You got to put the time in now. Okay. That's another conversation. But yeah, that's a big part of it. Now, from a player that's been playing for quite some time now, it's really what we've been planning all along for them, because we have shown them their financial plan. And as I said earlier, what if scenarios. So we throw in those what ifs way before the what if really starts happening. Okay. So let's take the example of a player that's made $4 million in his first 4 years. Now, all of a sudden, he gets into a second contract. He's a good player. He's a solid player. Okay. Now he's getting a $15 million contract. So now his portfolio value just went from a certain number at the end of 4 years to double to triple that number. It's life-changing, right? Now his portfolio can generate him not $50,000, but just strictly overnight generate him $150,000 now a year of income, right? So now we got to the point where we've been talking about for the last 4 years, right? Now he sees it, right? You'll look at your portfolio not just as a portfolio, but really as a company, right? It's going to generate you an income without the hassle of employees, let's just say, right? Right? Without the daily grind of who's showing up to work and who's not showing up to work, right? So in that aspect, it's pretty nice. Now we go to a second contract where we have experienced many a times $50 million, $100 million contract, right? That's generational wealth now you're talking about, okay? You're talking about a player who had, a pretty good significant amount of money going into year 4 of his portfolio, right? Some type of financial independence, to now creating, really generational wealth at 26 years old, and now might have $15 or $20 million overnight. Okay. So, there are ways to handle those situations, right? And there is responsibility with that now too. Okay. So where does the player actually really see his lifestyle, right? Doesn't have to live to the max or what his portfolio is generating, right? So that's the educational part too, throughout the years of being with them. And they get it. They start to understand it. Doesn't mean they can't go on a nice vacation. Doesn't mean they can't go buy something. But they really see the value, okay, of what this brings. And it brings the responsibility. And also navigating the responsibility for the family around them too, in some cases. Okay, so you can't leave out that formula either, right? And there's nothing wrong with getting to that point at the right time, not too early in your career, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen, but later on to do the things that now is a better time to do them, right? Maybe you want to pay off your parents' mortgage, right? Is there a better time to do it than doing it earlier because you're not there yet? Or is it a better time when you get that second contract to do that, right? These conversations are always discussed, and, and I never discourage a player when there's family love involved, right? I'm not going to, I know my affection towards my parents, towards my siblings, so those are conversations that, they do come up and you plan them when they're appropriate.
Sure. Now you're saying what if scenarios. So it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, sounds like these are a wide gamut of what ifs. The what if could be, what if at the end of this 4 years, you're not playing? It could be, what if at the end of this 4 years, you have a new contract? So it's kind of a wide gamut to where they know based on how their career goes, which direction it's going. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. I like to say that I'm not in the cookie cutting business because every family dynamics is different and you got to respect that. Okay. Here's a mom that's been taking care of their child for 18 years, 20 years, and I'm going to step in. I have to really look at the picture and see what's the reasoning behind these things. Okay. So what might work for one family might not work for another family. And they both have the same amount of money.
Sure.
Okay. One family could be more stable than the other family. Right. Right. One family might, help their brother and sister pay off student loans. I don't know, because they're going to school. One family might want to help someone, start a business or something. Okay. So my job, or the focus of the Seiler Group, is to really understand what's best, okay, from a financial point of view. And sometimes emotions come into play, obviously, okay? And you have to understand that you have to be able to really educate not only the player, but the family as well, that, there's certain times where it's a better position to do these things, okay? But at the end of the day, it's their assets.
Sure. Now I'm glad you brought that up in terms of it's not just the athlete. What do you feel like, because we're talking about, and we talked about on the way up here, is that, baseball has a different family than basketball. Basketball has a different family than football. They all have their unique perspectives and backgrounds. But when it comes draft day, there could be other friends that appear. Maybe other family members that you haven't heard from in a while that come out of the woodworks. How does the Seiler Group, talk to their athletes? How do you guys have those discussions? Because you're bringing up a great point of like, hey, we don't have the crystal ball, but this is a short window of an earnings career potentially, and you have maybe 6 to 7 hands that are out, kind of saying, Ed, remember me? I'm cousin Tommy over here, and Tommy really loved you growing up and changed your diapers, and man, it's going to be great to see you at the big stadium, and there's a lot of things I can do to help. How do you help athletes with those conversations?
That's a fair question. Okay.
That's tough. I mean, you're 18, you're 21, and you got
It's a fair
somebody that you
question.
love that you'd like to take care of,
Yeah.
but
It's a fair question. Again, it comes back to education, right? It really comes back to that, right? It's building that relationship with the player over time. Really, it's almost like you're talking to a player for a couple months, maybe a little bit longer. You're wondering how they're processing information. You look at it from how they're spending, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they say to you, I don't think it's the right time to do what I think I wanted to do a couple of months ago. The light bulb goes off. So you know that what you're doing is working now, because now you're having dialogue, right? And these players, they might not trust you so quickly, right? You got to build that relationship, right? And they know, they have a sixth sense of who's really on my side and who's really just trying to take me here, okay? So, it's not easy to tell a player the truth. We are not a yes company, right? The Seiler Group, right? We don't want to manage assets for a short period of time. We want to manage assets for a long period of time. We want to build that relationship, as I said before earlier, okay? So it just comes back to the fundamentals of having a team around us, the financial advisor, the wealth management director, the client services that we provide, the role that I have, okay? And having him or her understand that they have a team at the Seiler Group, right? And after a while, they start to understand who to call for certain questions, who not to call, okay, for questions. Because a lot of this is not about money. A lot of this is about, understanding psychologically how to deal with it, right? Right? At the end of the day, there's players that have to change their phone number. How's that for a conversation? Right? Go get another phone because the phones are blowing up, right? Like you said, people are coming out of the woodwork, right? And that's going to happen. So you have to manage that, and like I said earlier, it's not a cookie cutting system, right? You have to manage the personality of that player and understand the personality of that player and understand, the dynamics of the family too, right? Because people could be saying things in your ears. And, listen, players are always going to be approached, period. I don't care if you're an agent, you're a financial advisor, you're a marketing guy. Somebody's always going to be in your player's ear, right? What those conversations are, that's for another podcast, okay? Right? But they're always going to be in their ear. You have to make them realize that, right? You have to educate them on that aspect because when anyone's in your ear, they're always going to make it sound better than where you are, right? Why would they not, right? It's selling, right? We all want to sell, right? That's why building that education and that relationship is so important because they're always going to be approached, right? They're always going to be approached with, hey, I got a real estate deal for you, right? I got this, I got that. Our job is to vent those things for them. Our job is to build a relationship with the player that they could bring those things to us so we could evaluate them, right? To see if it's the right choice or not, right? Because to ignore it and to just say, don't worry about it. No, you have to be proactive on those things because that's never going to change, okay? So when you look at family members, we have to be proactive with it just as well. Come to us with those decisions. My best friend wants to open up a pizza joint. I want to give him an X amount of dollars to do it. All right, let's call up your friend. What do you mean, call up my friend? Well, did he have any business experience? Did he go to accounting? Did he work at a pizza shop? Did he own a business before? Did he work at a shop with his dad growing up? Where's the experience going to come from? Does he have a business plan? Like, send it over to us. Right? You know? Oh, no, I don't think he has any of those things. Well, then why would you? You're going to have failure then. It's probably not going to be successful. You know, is he going to work it? No, he's going to have people working for it. Well, how is the revenue stream going to come in? What's the cash flow? What's the 5-year plan? What's the exit plan? Right? So now it's like, you mind if you call him? I said, no, I think this is a good situation where you tell him exactly what I just said. Because I don't know him. Maybe this is the time where you actually have this conversation with him. Say to him, hey, listen, I know that you want me to invest in your pizza place. Why don't you take a couple of classes at the local school in accounting to know how to run a business? You see how fast he doesn't want to go to school to go learn accounting and how to run a business. Say, you know, I'll give you the money, but I just want to make sure that you know a little bit how to handle it, and go work at a pizza joint for 6 months for me.
Sure.
And I'll give you that money, right? And then maybe like we could have that conversation. See, there's an educational part of this, right? And I'm teaching him to be responsible, right? We go back to the escalator thing, right? Where, you know, in college, everyone's holding your hand. You're gliding through campus, right? There's no energy to go from one room to the other, right? Because everyone's guiding you, right? You know, you're not pounding your feet on the pavement. You're doing your work in the classroom for football. You're doing your work for your sport, right? But you really are just, you know, being spoiled. Come right down to it, okay? Right? Now you got to do the grind work, right? And that's what money is, right? Getting an education on the responsibility of it and how to manage it. And why is that important? It's your decision at the end of the day. It's your money, right? We're giving you advice, right? Solid advice of over 30 years of being in the financial world, right? That's what you're really buying, right? You ain't buying 2 years, you know? And I got, you know, you get an athlete who wants to be a financial advisor after his playing career, joins a group, you know, he's there for 1 year, starts getting into this, you know, space, you know, and I get the love for it. But where's the experience, right? You really have to look at this from, you know, like you make your choice to go to college because the head coach has won a national championship title or has 25 years of coaching, or the offensive lineman has won the Super Bowl. So he's going to teach me how to play now. He's got the ring in the room. Well, why wouldn't you take that approach with your financial advisor, right? Why wouldn't you not take someone who's got experience? It's probably the most important person that you are going to engage, not in your career, but for your life. So there's a lot of value in that, you know? And that's where, you know, I know a friend, you know, let's do it, you know. That's really not the approach. You should keep things separately if you can. My agent's my agent. My advisor's my advisor. My tax guy is my tax guy. You know, all in one, I don't know if that's as healthy as it should be, because no one should have control of that type of power.
Yeah. Now you talk a little bit about on the way up here, as well as just before we left, between the ears, right? It's everything. And these athletes know that on the game side, but there's also another aspect in terms of managing the wealth. And something that I get reminded of constantly, good friend of mine, pitchers in the big leagues, can't make this stuff up. And but he gets a Venmo request from some random guy every time he pitches poorly. And he goes, I don't know how he gets it, and he's never responded or commented, but it's like $5,000, and it's right after he gets in the clubhouse, he's got a notification, and it's like, yeah, there, it's like, shoot, that's, I mean, it's pressure to perform. And then there's stuff like that you didn't know until you go through it and have those sorts of things happen to you, how you're going to handle it. But it's hard from an outside perspective. Well, these guys are making $15 million. Why is that pressure? It seems as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of a behavioral thing than it is anything. Probably the biggest obstacle, would you say, is more the behavioral side of the management of the wealth and the X's and the O's, or do you see it more as X's and O's and mental aspect comes after?
I hope I answered this correctly. When you're in a public space, in a public's eye, you have to take responsibility for that. All right? Because I wouldn't say responsibility that you have to answer to everything, but you have to start to understand that you're doing something very unique that most people can't do. Let's take a look at Major League Baseball, right? You got, 720 players, 300 of them are pitchers. In the whole world, 300. The best of the best, right? You look at, at the NFL, right? 250, 260 kids get picked in all of the NCAA, right? Every year. You look at basketball, 60 players get picked in the whole world in the NBA. You're going to be in the public's eye. There's no way around it. You're going to get those crazy things, right? You're going to start to understand that is something that you are going to have to deal with, okay? At first, it's exciting, but as the years go by, it could be a little stress, right? It could be a little frustrating. I just want to go home, At the end of the day, they're human, right? But the outside world, looks at it as, you're making $50 million. Right? I don't understand why you're making $50 million, right? I can't comprehend that, right? Or, you're making $250 million, right? Well, the reason why you're making that is because you have a unique service that you could provide, okay? And the value is there. If the value wasn't there, they wouldn't be paying it. That's why NIL, it's a little bit of they're going through their space, but lately you've been hearing colleges in the red, right? By a large sum of money that they're losing every year with the athletic department, right? Right? That's something that they're going to have to address because you can't continue to put that burden on the state school taxpayers, or you can't continue to put that burden on the college students coming in, or however they correct that, that math there, okay? So when you're in a public's eye, you're going to get that, okay? There's no way around it. So how do we address that? Well, every player's different. Every mindset is different. The most dangerous place that you could be is in your mind. We all know that, right? There's highs and lows, right? So how do you really address that? Okay, is really how do you really behave in that pattern that's wrestling in your head, right? In anything, right? Good or bad. Okay. So in some cases, certain days you're good at it. Certain days you're just not good at it, right? So in our case, most of the athletes are pretty much away from the public, right? They have their own parking lot. They don't drive into the stadium in a normal parking lot, right? They leave in a different exit. Okay, they get there early. They're really not in the public's eye. So when the public gets that chance to see them as they walk on the field or walk through a tunnel in an arena, and and he lost the game for him, you can get a heckler, right? You don't get that behavior, right? You really don't focus on that. Athletes are not really geared up in that aspect of that space, because if they were, they'd never be an athlete. I think athletes now are more educated and are more concerned with the, I won't say silly questions, but the questions that have been addressed over and over again that a journalist or a reporter gives them. And you see that athletes are getting smarter in answering those questions that are kind of, how you feel after a loss. Or do you feel you're living up to your contract because, X, Y, Z, right? And I don't want to speak for athletes, but some of them are really good in answering those questions. And I just think that, the public wants that. How many times can you ask the same question over and over again, right? So I think as athletes spend more time and get more experience, they get better at it. And they're better is because their mindset gets better.
Sure.
Because you control every action that you really have, right? So as you start to understand that, you get better at it. And if you don't, that's when you have the problem players. And you can spot them immediately.
Makes sense.
Right?
Now, as we kind of start to wrap up here, the last topic I want to talk about is the post-playing career transition. Obviously, you start those conversations early, but then the day's here. Either somebody tells me, I have to tell myself, or my knee, my shoulder, name your body ailment, tells me I can no longer perform. How does that transition, work? How do those conversations evolve to where, hey, it's here, it's happening, and how do you help athletes with that transition? Because I think that's, to me, the, from Major League Baseball side is they got to figure out a way to be better in that space and helping these guys that you pursue something with every ounce of your being and then it's done.
Yeah.
And you could very easily just get lost in the sea, right? And they may have enough money, but it's everything. And then it's done. So just kind of curious how those conversations happen and evolve and go with the group that you're with.
Sometimes it's a light conversation for a player. Sometimes it's a heavy conversation for a player. If a player doesn't have what he really needs in his portfolio or didn't save, my client or any client, they realize they made a mistake earlier, right? And now they realize their career is coming to an end and it's just trying to make an extra $1 million, right? This is where, bankruptcy comes into play with these players, right? They're overextended. The money stream stops. They have enough money to carry them for a few years because, there's a psychological value in, in telling people that you can't afford what you can afford, but you still play the game that you can afford it, right? Because you still have a few dollars to keep the game going. But unfortunately, there's no other income stream that's going to generate you millions of dollars that you were making. Okay, right? Reality sets in, right? The advantage of having a financial advisor or a mentor is that these conversations are brought up way earlier. Okay, so when we look at a player, we want to look at it from a point of when do you want to walk away from the game, not the game telling you when to walk away. That's the real key, right? In that conversation, right? And that conversation starts very early in the relationship, right? because at first it's exciting, right? So there's levels of progression in this space, okay? So now you're saying to yourself, where do you want to be from a lifestyle point of view? Where are you comfortable in your living? Don't worry about how much money you have in your portfolio at this time. Where do you feel comfortable? And you start planting that seed early in the relationship. And believe it or not, you're watering it over their career. So it's growing. It's growing strong. And then out of nowhere, they say to you, one time you finally asked a question again, and they say, I think my wife and I will be comfortable at an X amount of dollars for the rest of my life. And then you say, okay, here's where you're at. You're already there, right? So now he's ending his contract, and maybe he just doesn't want to play anymore. Doesn't have to play anymore because he's financially stable. Okay? He's reached financial independence, and within a few more years will hit probably, generational wealth.
Sure.
Right? Right? So that question really gets addressed. Now, you can have the other side of it where, you weren't really supposed to play in the NFL as long as you did, right? You grind it out, your whatever happened, but you got yourself a position where you have a supplemental income that could generate you a pretty good sum of money, okay, on a yearly basis, almost like an early pension.
Sure.
Okay. And now we go into, what do you want to do? All right, I have to generate 70 grand. I got to generate 110 grand. Is my wife working? Is she not working? Do we have children? Right? Are we planning on having children? Right? Does she want to be a sit-home mom? Can she work from home this early stage? Right? Is grandma and grandpa around to help? Okay. Right? What do I want to be? I had a player told me 6 months ago he wanted to be a fireman after his playing career was over, maybe. He was thinking about it, right? And that took me by surprise, I was like, then I could see it, right? He's like, I just want to have a place. I want to step away from the game. I really don't want to be involved in it, maybe, right? That's his personal choice. But he can do that, right? It's when you overspend, when you think it's never going to end, right? When you're hearing all these things, how great you are, right? And unfortunately, everybody else is great too, playing the same position that you're playing, and you're hanging out for a few years. There's always like the day you came into the league, you're taking someone's job. You just kicked a guy who was, playing 5-7 roster spots or in the practice squad. Now you're coming in. You're less expensive than him because that guy's a veteran, so his pay scale is different, right? Now you're coming in at the league minimum, and you're 4 years younger, right? Now in 2 years, you're going to be the bait, right? Now it's your turn to be the same guy that you took the job away from. Because the NFL or any of these teams, any of these sports, not everyone's a superstar. Right? You can't play a game without the supporting cast, right? You got to put the people on the field or on the court, right? So for everyone to play, right? So there's golden opportunities, right? So you have to really take it from a perspective of, okay, if I wait to the end to figure this out, I'm probably not going to have the success that I really wanted at the end. The game didn't give me what I wanted. There's nothing wrong with walking away from the game with an X amount of dollars in your portfolio that most 26-year-old kids don't have, and most families don't have it to their 50. Okay? So now you got 25 years to grow that. Because then age is a big advantage of time in this space.
Sure.
Right? No different than someone telling you, since the day you work, you put $2,000 away, every year, never look at it, do that for 30 years, and you're going to have an X amount of dollars. Right? Just by doing that. Well, just imagine doing that, having that X amount of dollars at 26 years old. If someone had it at 50, but you started it at 25, you already have $1 million. Imagine that power. Just that simple transaction alone, right? So, these are conversations that you just have to have that with the players and show them, the magnitude of years, and it's just being disciplined in the market.
That makes sense. I do have one more question as we wrap up here. And a lot of this is probably for a separate podcast too. I was just thinking of this Class A situation with the Guardians, the closer, that was caught in this gambling scandal. And to me, it's just a complete lack of education. I think, why would you put yourself in a situation where you're putting yourself in a danger of your career? It's a complete lack of understanding of money. There's no other way of explaining it. And getting these guys to understand how much money they have and where they are is so vital and key to their careers. But last question I always like to ask, and I didn't even prep you for this one, so this is going to be an off-the-cuff answer. But as we got about another minute or two here, what's the best investment one can make? And this doesn't have to be an actual investment, right? This could be a lifestyle. This could be, but in your own mind, what's the best investment one can make?
The best investment one can make, and I'm not trying to be wise here, is in themselves. It's the best investment. Believe in yourself. Believe in what you want out of all this. Believe in, I go back as I live another year and get another year wiser, I find out the power of the mind, right? It really controls everything, right? Because you could put yourself in any space you want to put yourself into, okay? If your feet are in the weight room, be in the weight room. If your feet's in the classroom, be in the classroom. If you're with your family, your girlfriend, be with your family and your girlfriend. Okay, this space of trying to do 3 or 4 things at the same time is not really healthy. Okay, the beauty of Raymond James, right, which is why we are there, is because they provide those platforms for us in the research on how to financially get the best products out there for our athletes. So that part, is pretty much, I leave that to the financial team, right? I leave that to Raymond James Research. I leave that to the Seiler Group. My role is to really understand, the marketing side and how to really create these opportunities for these families, right? And to understand what they're really going through and to promote, the things that we have for them, okay, to get them to that best investment at the end of the day, right? And to educate them, okay? It's a very unique space, and I'm very grateful for it, okay? But as I tell, the mind's a very strong thing. So you have to invest in that more than anything. Because if you invest in that, everything else is taken care of.
Awesome. Well, Ed, I really appreciate you taking some time, as I know you're busy here in Indy with the combine and you got a busy rest of your day, but I appreciate you being willing to spend some time today to talk a little bit about what you do in your role specifically and what the Seiler Group does for athletes. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Jason, I really do appreciate the time. I want to wish you the best in your baseball space. Okay. I know that hopefully we could find some ground here and build a relationship with that as well. Okay. But I know that that's something that we have a strong interest in as well now. So I'm looking forward to creating that opportunity in that space. But I know that you played in the minor leagues, so you understand what it takes to, the mindset of it. You played for a few years, so I think you have a lot of value to bring to these young athletes, from not just from a point of financial, but also, how are you going to handle it, right? And I hope I was able to share some of that with you today.
No
Thanks,
doubt.
man.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, no problem.